Welcome, everybody. We have Mike today, and we are talking TTI treasure stuff. This is going to be fun. Mike, welcome back.
Thanks, Eric. I'm thrilled to be back.
Yes, it's been a while since we got to do a video together other than our roundtable, and I always enjoy having you on. So I wanted to get some ideas off you, and I know you have stuff that you want to talk about as well, and I think everybody's going to enjoy it because these are some pretty hot topics that are being talked about now with all the boxes, because we are approaching hunting season, right? It's getting to springtime soon, and people are going to be boots on the ground a lot more than they probably are already. And recently, Jenny Kyle on Mysterious Writings put out some ideas on where the boxes are located. And I know some other people have talked about it as well. And I think we bounced around some ideas earlier in previous videos. But I shared this with Jenny and I shared it on our Discord as well. But I wanted to bounce it off of you and see what you thought in regards to the distribution of all 5 boxes based on population. So
yeah, let's do it, Eric. But before you do, I wanted to mention something. So, I've been talking in the Discords a bunch, and someone made a comment to me, and they're like, "Well, why are you focusing on where these boxes are located if you don't have a location identified by now?" Like, they kind of were implying you're far behind. And I wanted to challenge that person and really kind of everyone watching, right?
Yeah.
I think it's important to kind of constantly reassess where you think things are. Question,
agree.
Everything you have and maybe, your biases or what you're convincing yourself of, and see what makes the most sense, right? So I think what Eric's going to share and what we're going to talk through, and a lot of other people are doing this, right? They're constantly kind of looking at where are things mapped out, where might they be located, because it really just helps you maybe solidify a theory you have or shift your prerogative on a different box. And I just think it'll help you in the long run to constantly kind of reassess, look at the whole big picture.
That's a great point, Mike, and it's a great exercise to do. And because I know I don't have anything higher than on any one particular box more than a 70% certainty where I think it's at. I mean, yes, I will be going boots on the ground soon for a box, for Appalachian Puppet box. But by all means, does that not, I don't have the level of confidence where I'm 90%, not even close to 90% if it's there. And even in my location I'm looking for, it's still in a couple mile radius, which is huge when you're talking about trails, right?
Yeah.
I mean, and so it's good to keep, like Mike said, challenge yourself and be certain where it's at, because as soon as you do, then like John said, once a couple boxes have been found, then it'll be a little easier to find or identify. And I think there's a lot to unpack in that statement. And as soon as one's going to be found, I'm sure soon, I would think, maybe not though, because of that, but we do know that there are some people that are within 200 feet. So whether they know it or not, if that were me, I would hope I would want to know if that was me or not.
Yeah. I wish we knew who it was, right? Or more specifically, like the actual box. And I think we have good ideas, right? But we just don't know 100%.
Well, I mean, I wish, if I would know if they knew who they were that were there, because, we've said this before, if you walked 3 miles on a trail and by that measurement that somebody was in 200 feet of it, that doesn't really help much, because you might as well be within 3 miles of it, right? Because you don't know at what point you're 200 feet from it.
Right.
It's not like you're dropped off from a helicopter into your spot and you're automatically 200 feet from this box, or even 100 feet from it. He could have got intel from somebody, or some place that somebody was on XYZ trail, and then he extrapolated from that well, then that person was probably within 100 feet of it.
Yeah.
So does that really tell you a lot, right? Because I do think about this a lot, and I think it is something I like to revisit and bounce off people and what their thoughts are on it, because I go back and forth on how I feel about that.
Yeah, and I mean, based off of all the answers to his questions from mysterious writings, right? The Pokemon box was one. I think he reiterated it twice within the whole frame of the questions that
Yeah,
people wouldn't been within 200 feet of it of the box of that box. So I'm sure it's driving everyone crazy who has been searching for that box. They're going back to the spots. They're poring over places that they visited. But to your point, if it is a 1, 2, 3, even a 1 mile trail that they went on, 200 feet in each direction, if you don't have a clue that brings you to a specific spot, it's going to be extremely tough to locate, or it's just going to be time consuming, right? Like you can
yeah,
do it, but it's going to take a lot of man hours, especially if you're one person. Now, maybe if you have a group of like 20 people and you can get them all on board for all going out as a group and searching, that might make it a lot easier. And in fact, I think that would be a really cool idea if a large group of people actually found a box together.
yeah. That would be cool.
Some cool headlines.
Yeah. Now, for the sake of an exercise, like say, Forrest Fenn box was at a specific national park. Well, those national parks are huge, right? And you could have easily walked on that a trail and say the word got out. Hey, it's we now know it's in this national park. It could be another 6 months plus before somebody finds it. So that's why I think, to your point, it is a good exercise to do this, right? It does help. It helps, at least I know it helps with me, and I'm sure it helps with you also, to get an idea of where we think these boxes are. And before I share this, I do want to let people know that this is just a general area. It's not a specific location or a specific state, but this is just for the sake of discussion. And I thought it was pretty interesting. So I'm going to share this. And we have U.S. population density based off of the U.S. Census Bureau's website. And so it's got like a little heat map of population. So for the sake of this discussion, let me see if I can I don't know if I can blow this up to full screen. But anyway, I think we could see it well. I'm thinking for the sake of this exercise that the lion's share is on the West Coast somewhere. So this is going to represent people on the West Coast, as you see. It's pretty heavy density population there. And we know a given that the Forrest Fenn box is in one of 4 states, right? We have New Mexico, we have Colorado, we have Wyoming. I always get these mixed up.
Yeah,
Montana, Wyoming, Montana, right? So for the sake of this, I place this sort of in the middle because I don't know what state it's in. I thought I had a good idea at one point, but I just don't know now. And this covers the more mountain area. And as you see, it's not very heavily populated there. So I think it's a fair shake to place these 2 boxes here. Now we go to the Pokemon box, which this is along the path, sort of in the south. This represents the south area. And I would place it more or less somewhere around here, not necessarily favoring a specific state, but I think this covers a pretty good portion of Illinois up in Wisconsin area population wise. Then we got past and future box, which I'm thinking could be somewhere maybe even lower around here. This would even cover more of the the southeastern section because it's pretty heavily populated here. And then you have Appalachian Trail or Appalachian Footpath, whichever you prefer, in the New England area. And yes, I am a little biased to this area, but for the sake of this exercise, I'll even drop it down a little more. As you see, it's very heavily populated right here. And to me, this covers a fair distribution, I would think, based on population. And I know population changes over time, but I think to be fair, for John I don't think we expect him to, get the exact population distribution that everybody's equally. And this is also assuming it's not in Alaska or Hawaii, which he has not ruled out. So with this part of the exercise, I want to get your feedback on this and what you think.
I think first off, it's very compelling to think about, right? Especially when you see that the heat map, the density, right, and where those boxes are located, it does seem to jive a lot. And I know people are going to flip flop the line share
Sure.
and the past and future box, and then even if you do that, right, they're still falling kind of in the same population density areas, generally speaking.
Right. And that was the whole point that I didn't want to say this is where it's at. This is where my mind was going with it.
Yeah. I think like one thing that like pops into my head when looking at this, I question Florida, right? Because it's obviously very densely populated. But I think from everything I personally come up with, and I think it's a general consensus pretty much from everyone in the discords in the community, that Florida seems to kind of be out, right? It doesn't, unless somehow the line share or past and future end up in Florida, it just seems like that's going to be a state that's probably eliminated. And that's just interesting to think about when you look at this specific lens of it.
Yeah, I had a hard time when I looked at this population map. I was like, man, Florida's really getting whacked out. If you lived in Miami or something, that's a long state, But again, how do you, as a treasure hunt creator, equally distribute it? Because you could say the same thing for Alaska or Hawaii. And maybe that's why John didn't rule it out. I mean, this is under a general assumption that it's not there. And I can't say that with 100% certainty. I can't say anything with 100% certainty on any of the boxes. But, you do have, heavily populated in Hawaii. It looks like right here, albeit it's a small area. But you can't discount that out. But I did think I just didn't know. I didn't realize how heavily populated the eastern to Midwestern was until I saw this map, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I think so I live in New Jersey, and I think the county I live in is if it's not the most densely populated county in the country, it's like second or third. So it's extremely dense in population in our area here in the Northeast. I was going to ask, you had shared something with me earlier, but do you want to highlight the chapter thought that you had?
So the second part to this exercise was I found it very interesting because when I put these up, I was looking at it and I was like, how would something else confirm this location? And I thought about the book and the chapters. So you have chapter 24, which is Forrest Fenn box, would be from left to right. And we're not talking about the, well, you could even talk about the lion share. Lion share part 1, right? Lion share would be beginning at the left. You have chapter 24, which is Forrest Fenn. Chapter 25, which is Pokemon. Chapter 26, which is Past and Future. And chapter 27, which is Appalachian Trail box. And ironically, it does sort of go from left to right. So in my mind, I thought, wow, maybe now I know you got these boxes different times and you probably hit them at different times. So this might totally be not even a point to make, but wouldn't it be interesting if he did hide them in order that he wrote them in the book? Maybe one of those things he didn't think about, sometimes, without even thinking, you do something and it ironically fits with the order that you wrote the book, because in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, if he did get the lion's share box last, well, it's I want to keep it relatively close because I already traveled the whole United States to hide these other boxes, right? And then, the Forrest Fenn, he said that it leads it to that place anyway. So that would be one where he would put it at. But it makes you think a little bit. If you were to go out and do a recon mission and start hunting them, wouldn't it make sense to do them in some type of logical order so you're not just traveling randomly across the United States?
Yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense, right? You think about the book, the way it was written, left to right,
Yeah.
simplistically, right? Starting with the lion's share, ending with the Appalachian footpath box. Um, and I even like the idea we almost kind of have a semicircle in a shape here, right? Like
Yeah,
we could shift them around. And
sure.
he talks a lot about that in the book, like this circular nature, right? Starting out on a journey, starting out with the map, he's talking about his son and drawing the map. Um, so I think I like the idea of it really kind of going along this path, moving forward, and then essentially, like, theoretically, maybe you could make a full circle with kind of the shape of where these boxes are hidden. Just that idea is really cool.
And then I think, although I'm not a big fan of the coins being used, well, I think they're possibly used in many different ways. I mean, with each chapter, they're probably used a little differently. But I tend to lean on that they're used somehow in one component of each chapter. I have nothing to back this up on, but that's just sort of where my mind goes. But I did play around with placing the coins at different places and stuff, and seeing what I could try to logically make without manipulating them too much. Because I also like to, when I use a coin, I like to originally use them in the proper orientation that they're in the book. Because as soon as you, especially if you're using it on a map, as soon as you start rotating them and expanding them um, in different sizes, you're running into an infinite amount of combinations that it can be used for, thus making it pretty hard to pinpoint. And I don't know, I was going to ask your thoughts. How important do you think the coins are to the solve in each one? He doesn't talk about them much.
I used to think they were extremely important, but as
Mm-hmm.
more time goes on, I'm just finding it harder and harder with all the information that we've gathered kind of about them. I don't know. I'm relying less on them as part of the solve. I do think I think each one is going to be some level of more important than others, right? So one might be really important to the solve potentially, whereas on the opposite end, one might have almost nothing to do with the solve potentially.
Yeah.
Um,
And that's why I think the one I think most about is probably the Forrest Fenn one like that. I don't know why, but then again, from the beginning, I was like, oh, these mean nothing. So what do I know? I do flip flop, but to your point, I go back and forth on those. And it's funny that of all the interviews and Q&As, I don't ever recall, other than are they used, were they specifically made, or could they be a clue, any other questions about them.
yeah.
It's pretty interesting.
I think then, if you get the chance to interview him again, we need to
Oh, yes.
get some very, very specific questions, related to the coins that can maybe help us figure them out a little bit more.
Yeah.
Because they're there. They're definitely a tool, and it's just figuring exactly how we use them. And yeah.
I think that's a great idea to pitch to John's people first. Once he recovers from all of his interviews and Q&As, we have a couple people that want to get on a call with you.
Yeah, absolutely.
That'd be pretty cool. So that was really my exercise I wanted to do. With this map. I know you have a map you want to talk about as well, but do you have any other things to add? Would you move any of these boxes around? And if so, which ones would you
Yeah, not to sound like a broken record, because I know I've personally said this a few different times on the channel,
Mhm.
but I think the lion's share is kind of up in Washington. So like I would just shift that up a little bit
Mhm.
more.
Oops.
Um, and then, it's interesting thinking about the Forrest Fenn box, because my gut, and based off of the answers to the questions, I think that might have been the one where he knew where he wanted to hide it first, right? And then looking at this population density thing, would we just want to, like, and maybe that'll be a good segue. Maybe I'll circle back to that when we kind of talk about my map a little bit, which is
Yeah,
I'm focusing on the Forest Fen.
sure.
But I'm just wondering, like, about that. Like, where would that potentially be located? That, let's just say, if that was even a thought of his at first, or did he hide that one and then kind of think, you know what, I want to make these other treasure boxes, or have that, at least have the Forest Fen location identified that he was going
Yeah,
to hide it,
yeah,
and then decide to do the other boxes, and then say, well, I want to make it more accessible for people. So maybe that one isn't necessarily as in a dense populated area, but the others are.
yeah, yeah. So your Pokemon box, where would you place this one?
Oh man, I don't know anymore. I
Yeah.
was convinced that it was going to be in Arkansas, based off of his answers, and saying people had been within 200 feet of it. But I'm really surprised that it hasn't been found yet, since people have gone back and been going over those trails again. It's not to say that it won't be there, but
Right.
I just don't know. I don't know. I almost want to shift it a little bit more towards Texas.
Okay. So maybe around here.
Well, I'm curious. What do you think?
Well, I have to be careful what I think because I'm working with a viewer. I was supposed to go this weekend, but we're punting on it to another date due to circumstances out of our control. I'm just going to leave it at that. And I'm out of respect for him because I've been talking to him quite a bit, and I'm quite team him on this. And from the things he shared with me, I'm pretty biased on the location on that. So, but out of respect for him, and saying that because he has so much time vested in this, I'm going to punt. I'm going to plead the fifth on this one.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. And I think the past and future is kind of like in the Tennessee area, if I'm interpreting this map correctly. Or do you
Yeah,
have it more
you got Tennessee
North
here, you got
Carolina?
North Carolina. I put it in the middle because I'm still on the fence. I've always thought my initial thought was either Minnesota or either in North Carolina or that area around here. Either Kentucky, Tennessee, North Carolina were my other thoughts for where that could be at.
I'm gonna throw a wild card just so I can hear
Sure.
people in the comments tell me there's no way it's there.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Great.
let's throw it up by Chicago,
Okay.
because he is obviously a huge Michael Jordan fan.
Mhm.
The Chicago Bulls. I'm personally a Bears fan, so I just like the Chicago area, and I just think it would be cool if it did end up being somewhere around there.
Well, I wish you were right because I would be boots on the ground every day. I will tell you one thing though, there isn't a lot of beautiful places to hide, with no disrespect to Illinois or Indiana. I think to get into any potential places based on my own bias, you would have to go pretty deep south Indiana to reach anything that would be remotely close like that. And Illinois, at least in the Cook County area, I don't know of any place. I mean, don't get me wrong, there are some nice little parks and stuff, but in order to place it, I don't know. I had somebody not too long ago ask me, say, "Oh, I think this." I forgot which box was located by, there's a Hard Rock casino and this. I go, and there's a quarry. And I go, you're talking about Thornton Quarry and Hard Rock and Black Oak. I go, with all due respect, I grew up in that area.
Yeah.
There is no place that I would even consider or think that John would put it over there. And he's like, I should have thought I should do my research first before I, put that together. But back
But
to your point.
let
Go
me
ahead.
play devil's advocate a little bit.
Sure.
And obviously, I do not know the Chicago area very well. I've only been one time on a nice little trip to go see a bunch of different things.
Yeah.
So I don't really know a lot about the area. However, he said in his interview that it's first things was places that were important to him.
Yeah.
Right? And then beauty. So I'm just mentioning that, right? Not so much about Chicago, right? Because I actually don't think it's in Chicago. I just wanted to have a little fun.
Sure.
But
Sure.
just as we are all thinking about where these locations are,
Yeah.
I'm falling into this trap where I'm going to beauty first, right? I'm
Yeah.
like, oh, it's got to be beautiful,
Yeah.
right? But I keep trying to remind myself. He said places that were important to him, and maybe I'm misquoting slightly, but that's kind of what I remember.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to say put priority over that. So like I'm just using again Chicago as an example, right? He loved Michael Jordan, loved the Bulls. Like, I actually he was highlights in his book that he was a fan of his from North Carolina. So maybe that's where the emphasis is, right?
Yeah.
But just to think about places that were important to him, and we know based off of some context in the book that certain things that are important to him.
Yeah, I mean, in all fairness, Michael Jordan didn't live in the city. He lived out in the burbs up north, about by Deer Park or Naperville or um, Barrington or something like that. And my brother lives around that area, and there's nice places. So yeah, you could theoretically, and I didn't mean to discount and poo-poo on Illinois in any way, but my own personal bias leans towards these bigger, and maybe that's a good point we make as well. That do we have a bias in our head that it has to be in some popular national park or forest? Because I know I have to stop myself. I mean, I did it tonight, right? Talking about, well, it can't be there. Well, that's not necessarily true. We do know now it's not in a metropolitan area.
Right.
But outside of that, it could be in a park in some suburban community that's in nature and not heavily populated. Right.
I think I found through this whole process, you'd be surprised at how much nature there is around you, right? Like,
yeah,
even though I live in an extremely dense area, there's a ton of amazing hiking, right, within a couple miles of where I live. And sometimes you get out there and you're hiking, several hours or miles, and you realize that like you're not that far away from like a couple miles from New York City.
yeah,
But when you're there and you're actually in the forest, it doesn't feel like it. Whether or not that's exactly a place that he would hide something, I have no idea yet. But it's just I'm reminding myself of that in places that I've looked and gone boots on the ground. And I think too it would be important for anyone searching, like, don't rule everything out.
right. That's a good point.
Look at it. Sometimes it takes going boots on the ground, and you get there and you're like, you know what? There is no way that it's here, or you get there and you're like, wow, actually, now that I'm here, I could see this, being a place where he hides it.
Yeah, because I mean, we do have Indiana State Dunes, which I hike I've hiked often, and that's a beautiful place, and Michigan. Did you ever consider Michigan to be an area?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And you had brought up Wisconsin, right?
Oh yeah.
So I mean, there's a lot of awesome, awesome, beautiful nature places. Obviously, with all the lakes up there, a lot of great scenic places that could be possible.
Yeah.
So I still there's a lot of stuff that's going around. I know Mysterious Writings put out something up about Tennessee recently that was pretty compelling.
Mm-hmm.
So kudos to Jenny on that. So it made me like consider Tennessee a lot more and trying to look around that area between North Carolina and Tennessee. So we'll have to see. But yeah, getting back to your map, I think the only one left is the Appalachian Footpath Box, which until more compelling evidence of another spot comes out, still defaulting to that Little Rock Pond, Vermont area.
Yeah, I place New England area, but back to back to what Jenny did with the past and future. I also shared some things on a coin on the word search that was pretty compelling to her, and I should have brought it up and talked about it tonight, but we're sort of talking maps, so that's for another episode. But that was without manipulating the size of the coin with the word search, and we're talking the same size and same orientation, and it was pretty cool what it did. So maybe that'll be a teaser for another video we'll talk about. Awesome. So yeah, I think Appalachian Footpath, Appalachian Trail is in the New England area only because it does fit up there pretty well, population wise, and I could be drawing on my own bias of where I think it's at, but I don't think it's a stretch saying it's in that general area, and that's a pretty big area to cover. There's a lot of places you can hide it out there. So with that, I will take mine down here and let me know when you're ready, and I'll pop up your map.
Yeah.
And let me pop out this so I can get it up. All right. So we have CalTopo on your screen. Why don't you take us through what you got?
Yeah, so this was a website I discovered. I'm sure a lot of people out there watching this may already know what CalTopo is, but it's CalTopo.com if you're not familiar. It's a free website, so you can go on there and kind of use different levers. Of course, they have a buy up module, but nothing I'm doing is inclusive of that buy up module. This is all what's for free, right? And simply, I kind of started. When I launched this, I had just kind of mapped out all of the locations where I thought they could potentially be. But I wanted to point out a couple of things about Forrest Fenn, and specifically when you kind of use this site, what you can do. So one thing, and this may be obvious to a lot of people listening, okay, but I think it took me a little while or until recently to kind of accept that this was the reality. So in his most recent interview, right, he really hammered in that it's in somewhere he searched for the Forrest Fenn treasure. This is important for a couple reasons. When the book first came out, there was a lot of discussion if other states might be in play outside of the four. That, in my opinion, has been completely eliminated. On top of that, something that I more recently did, and I'm going to pull up the original Thrill of the Chase map. This is the map. Let me hide this for a sec. This is the map that he used in the book to illustrate where the treasure would be. So when you think about this, I mean, that eliminates a large part of New Mexico as well.
Yeah.
And again, for a lot of the people who have been who did the Forrest Fenn and did the Thrill of Chase, again, this is very obvious. But to someone a little bit newer to it, like myself, now knowing that this was his search area, I'm now making this my search area for the Forrest Fenn treasure box. So I just wanted to highlight this in case there's other people, for whatever reason, may not have looked into the Thrill of Chase and looked at this map. Again, it's widely available on the internet for free. So I just did my own kind of mapping of that. Now, what I did in CalTopo, when you get here, there's a couple very simple things that you can do, right? You can create your own kind of lines and polygons, and that's just simply what I did. I just took a basic area, tried to match it up, generally speaking, to what the map from the Thrill of the Chase was. And then I kind of went in here, and it allows you to create some terrain shadowing to help you look at certain elevations. So what's really cool is I have a couple filters set up, okay? And you can set up a bunch of different overlays, okay? And you can adjust them however you want to. So the main one that I've been working with, and I think people would find useful, is this elevation.
Yeah.
So you can set this, you can set the lower elevation, you can set the higher elevation, you can set the color, you can set the shading, make it look however you want. And that'll help you identify certain areas on the map. So when you're zooming in and kind of looking around, which I'll do a little bit of in a second, it helps you figure out what's actually in that elevation. And that's just kind of a cool thing. So you may be wondering if you're looking at the screen why I picked 6,200 and 8,800 as my markers. Originally, I did the 5,000 to 10,200, which is the discussed elevation from the thrill of the chase. But he said in his interview, for all he knows, it could be directly in the center. So in my mind, I'm interpreting that as a clue or a hint
Mm-hmm.
to say that he may not know the exact elevation he hit it in,
Right.
but it's probably I'm just reducing my band to
Yeah, you're cleaning up the noise a little bit.
a little bit.
Yeah. No, I
Before
think
I go on, I mean,
fair.
what do you think? Yeah.
I think that's fair. I think it's very fair. I know I talked to Kobe from Living to Dream. He was on my show a long time ago, and he did something similar. And I don't know if he used CalTopo or not, but he also did overlays of, different where sage was grew and different types of things because he was really involved in the original Forrest Fenn. So I don't know if you could do that on this, and I'm not sure how he created those maps, but I found it pretty interesting.
It's entirely possible. I mean, again, I'm not going to go in. There's a lot of different options here in your map layers, and again, I'm just using the free version. So you may be able to buy up and add a bunch of different things. I know there's ways to import stuff, and I know you interviewed recently the guys from Vail, and they have a really cool map where you can do some of this stuff as well. I don't think they had this elevation piece, which is why I'm using this specific map.
Mm-hmm.
But that's a great tool as well that would highlight and push people to. But yeah, just to show this, right? So like when you start zooming in, right, and like I'm just going to use Colorado as an example because that's the state I'm looking at for the Forrest Fenn Treasure, right? You can keep zooming in, and it'll again highlight the areas and the shaded areas that were in my bandwidth. So like some of this dark green area falls outside of the bandwidth. So then I would be looking kind of like go back to my shading and remind myself of my own colors, but there's blue to red colors, right? Focusing on those areas.
Okay.
And that's, again, you can mess around with your own colors. I added another one in here to put everything in like deep black that falls outside of the range. So it'd
be easier to see where you're at.
Exactly. So again, this was just something that I did, but I think would be really useful, and I wanted to share people again because there's no cost, so it's easy to just log in.
So how do you change the colors? You just go to the edit?
Yeah, so you could depend upon the overlay you want, right? So like I have this modeling, and I set up this I added this terrain modeling, and then you can edit it once you have it on there and select a bunch of different things. Like for me, slope's not important. Canopy cover, not really important, but the elevation, because we know a factor of that.
Yeah.
That's what I focused on. And some people I'm sure are going to be way more advanced than I am at this stuff, but this is just a simple tool to kind of help you get a look at it. And then it's not showing on here, but I have a second one that said everything under 6,000, like put in black. And that's why.
Would that be your base layer or?
That's like my second layer. I don't know why it's not showing here for whatever reason. That's why it's black and black shaded out, so you can ignore those areas because they fall underneath.
That's a really good tool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I never thought I used CalTopo. I used two or three different maps when I tried to drill down on the Appalachian Trail one. I used the Appalachian Trail interactive map, which is free, and I'll put links in description for these. And I used, because that one's a little, I don't know, I would say easier, but to me it was a little more user friendly. To me, this user. Because when I started using CalTopo, I started hitting a bunch of buttons, and I'm like, what did I do? How do I get it back? And it's crazy stuff. But the nice thing about Appalachian Trail Interactive is it'll put the mile marker from Springer Mountain to Maine. So
yeah, that's a great map. If people don't know about that interactive Appalachian Trail map is really, really cool. Yeah. And I think, like, Eric, you and I have talked a few different times, and we've highlighted a ton of different tools. But I think, like, the overall point is, like, there is a lot of things that people can use to really help look into different areas. I know, I think it's On Hunt or On Hunt X or something like
On
that.
X. Yeah,
Yeah,
on X. Yeah.
yeah, that's another service that can help, you could subscribe to, and it can help you look at whether it's something's private land or
Yeah.
public land. Like, there is so many things out there,
Yeah. All
and
Trails and Gaia
all
and
trails.
yeah.
Yep.
Now, what I found, because just transparency on a lot of those apps, the free version is very limited on those. And although they're good and convenient, what I prefer when I get it down to an area that I'm going to go boots on the ground, I buy the National Geographic map of that area because it has everything you could possibly need on there, and it's waterproof. And you could take it with you, so you don't have to worry about your phone dying or losing service. I know you can download offline maps, but to me, um, I just like using that map. Yeah, they're about 13 or 14 bucks, but you got them forever, and they're pretty cool. Only probably because I grew up with using a road atlas when I was, you know, showing my age here, but um, I like those for getting down to the granular areas because it allows me to not be distracted by everything on the computer, and I don't have to be tied to my desk or my phone. Because my phone, I don't know, it's trying to use this stuff on your phone. I have big fingers, and it messes that up a lot. So using that map really helps out, the physical map. I don't know if you done that.
Well, not exactly those, but
Yeah,
funny enough, when I was younger, my father and I would go to AAA a
yeah,
bunch, and they used to give all these free maps when you're talking to them about booking trips and stuff like that. So we have my father's held on to everything. So we have stacks of these old maps that I've definitely referenced, and they come in handy.
yeah.
They're pretty cool. So I've looked back at those, but those don't have as much detail as kind of the map that you're referring to. I don't believe.
Right. Yeah. The National Geographics, and I'm not, making money off them or anything. I just like using them. And I've accrued quite a bit over the past year on different places. And it's a nice, scrapbook of places I've looked at. And I have a couple on my wall that I've hanging now. And every once in a while I'll look at them because when you get down to different trails, it really highlights it. And I know on these you can do the same. You filter back and forth, but I don't know. To me, I prefer having the paper one. It's to scale, so I know how to read it and figure out where everything's at, and it's really nice and handy. And it's maybe an appeal to nostalgia for me as well. Using that.
Yeah, no, I think it's awesome. Regardless of what anyone uses, right? We're just trying to highlight different things that are out there
Yeah,
because A, there is a lot of stuff out there, and I think B, people don't take advantage of enough of the tools that are readily available.
yeah. That's a good point. And not everybody knows, just because either you or me or a group of people that we talk to understand this stuff. There's people out here that's never even touched a map before, or never even they don't know what Appalachian Trail Interactive Map is. Heck, there's also interactive maps for all the national trails. Believe it or not, you go on and you take your pick. You go and it'll have the same features on those maps. And I just learned that not too long ago. So there's really cool stuff out there to use. And I'll link those up in description as well. And I encourage people to click on them and use them, and don't get the paid ones. Just use the free ones. I think the interactive ones that are put on, those are free anyway. They don't have, but things like CalTopo and stuff, they do have paid versions of it. It all depends how detailed and how much money you want to spend on it. But I don't even think the paid ones are that much, are they?
Yeah, I think the most valuable subscription that I got was through the All Trails. I think
Yeah.
that's been the one that I've gotten the most usage out of. I did the Onyx for a little while, but I didn't find that I personally was using it enough to sustain a subscription.
Yeah.
But that's why I come on here and I'm trying to highlight all the free stuff because I love using
Yeah.
whatever I can get for free.
Yeah. And that's another good thing, reason why we talk about this stuff, hopefully somebody, you whatever you get out of these videos, maybe like, hey, I learned, these different resources to use, which is good. Now, I wanted to talk to you a little about, since we're talking Forrest Fenn here, and unless you have some more things you wanted to talk about the map, I wanted to bounce something off you. And pardon me if I'm reading it off paper. I don't have this memory. I should by now. But this, so when I look at this poem, it keeps me up at night a lot. And there's times where I think I'm getting close, only for it to be like I took my glasses off and everything just goes together. But I wanted to bounce this. I'll read it to you, and we could discuss it. But before the poem, he goes, while you don't need to know Forrest Fenn poem in order to solve this one, you may want to go online and read it to give yourself some additional context. Then he goes on to say, but everything you need to know to arrive at a fairly close search area for our hobnail treasure box can be found within my poem below. Now, people may be saying, well, this is what he's saying, and it is what it says, but this is a treasure hunt and this is a puzzle. And I found, if you listen to American Treasure Podcast, Dave Colonna's, I think it's on episode 3 or episode 2 where he talks about this. He actually reads this out, and Dr. R. Squared actually wrote about this, not specifically about this, but he wrote about this and when John read the poem out loud. And this was in the early days before I think the hunt even launched. And there's something to say about when the creator recites the poem, where he pauses, what he emphasizes, if he does at all. But I've just found it interesting, these 2 paragraphs he wrote. And I wanted to get your thoughts, but my first one, and you can add to this as well if you got something else out of it. But he says, although you don't need to know a Forrest Fenn poem, right? So to me, that says you don't need to know it. I did my own thing, right? But it may give you some additional context. Now that you can take it literally, additional context, right? It could mean just so you understand why I chose these words because it's a homage to Forrest Fenn's poem. Or is there something deeper into that statement? And we'll start off with that paragraph first.
Well, it's a really confusing question because so while you were talking, I flipped back to the Thrill of the Chase on the screen, right? So the original Forrest Fenn poem, and I struggle to really even formulate an answer because when you think about how he wrote his poem, I mean, is it just an homage? It's the same amount of verses and same amount of like lines. Like it is in a way a copy. Now he obviously changed a bunch,
right.
But it's almost in my mind more than an homage. It's just an altering of, right, to fit what he wanted to say and fit his treasure hunt. So it's like he took that and then changed the words. It's not that in my mind, not that he wrote a new poem. I don't know. What do you think about that?
Well, I know this may be controversial, but you know what? I'm just saying what's on my mind and what I feel at the moment. And because I've suppressed my feelings earlier on in my days of doing this channel, just because of my fear of, I don't know. But now I'm, I think we're at the point where this box is the one that's, he doesn't say people have been close that he knows of. And I think we talked about this in a roundtable. This is the one box that we know it's in one of 4 states. We can't say that about any other box. We can say about Appalachian Trail, it's on one of 14 states, right? And Pokemon, we can assume it's in one of those states, but we can't say that with certainty. It could be in a state not mentioned in there, or even around the loop, right? Because you can make the argument it could be in adjacent states, right? And then you have lion share, which would be anywhere. Alaska and Hawaii included, because you didn't rule them out, right?
Yeah.
For the sake of that. My initial thought, and I keep circling back to this, is that although Forrest Fenn's poem, I didn't search for it, so I can't speak of it, right? But I think, yes, John hit it in a place where he searched. So we can sort of make some assumptions that he's basing it off his interpretation of the poem, right? But then John also says that, he placed it where he thought he should have put it, because he didn't go by all of his things. So what I think John is doing with this poem is, although he's saying to get a custom, or to get additional context to it, is why the heck is he using place once was brown and all these other things that align up with this? I think John has gamified this in a way that by getting context is, well, it must be mean Homer Brown, because that's what Forrest Fenn did, and it must be warm water's halt, must be. And I know John said, well, in his Q&A about, well, it makes sense where cool water flows to me, but we can't assume that that's the same meaning of what Forrest Fenn's is. And I've been back and forth on reading Forrest Fenn's poem, which I've done a number of times. And I think that adds more confusion to this solve. I feel that when this one's found and the solution is put to it, there's going to be a lot of upset people, and it's going to be so much different than what we think it is. That the way he uses words could quite literally just be all you need is a poem, because these words that you're using somehow, whether it be wordplay, whether it be, whatever, that I said this before, I think maybe we said it at our round table, is that once you understand one clue, you get that clue, then all the other ones are going to be like, yeah, because now I know what I'm looking for. Right. So it's not like, well, I found where warm water's halt is. It said this because it's where where water is. I think when you understand what that is, or place once was brown, well, it's something totally different, right? Yeah. It's the way he structured it. Then if you get that concept, then you're going to get this whole thing, and you're going to figure out, and you're going to have a good idea, at least to start off with. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, you said a lot, so I had a bunch of different things running through my mind. Yeah. But I agree with you that when we find out the solution, I think it is going to be drastically different from the thrill of the chase, because I think, if I am interpreting what John has said through the interviews correctly, I think he might have started writing his poem before he fully knew the full solution of the thrill of the chase and whether or not that was actually even right. I think but it's hard to tell the timeline, and I don't want to pin down too much information based out of that. But I agree with you in that I think it's going to be drastically different. I think maybe not only this box, but maybe all boxes, there's going to be people who are disappointed. There's been some awesome solves that have been shared with the community that sound, you're like, wow, how did that not actually work out? Because that was
Yeah.
an incredible
absolutely.
solution that people have come up with.
Yeah,
You know,
habeas treasures. I mean, his stuff is brilliant. I'm
yeah.
like, I'm like, and I look forward to that guy's videos. I'm like, I'm going to stop doing my channel. I'm just going to watch his stuff. Right.
Like I think a little bit about the past and the future box and some of the answers that John has provided. And he's like, specifically around ciphers and in saying that, like, oh, I didn't do any of that. I don't even know what you're talking about. I don't, again, he could just be playing coy, but it does seem like he may have made these things simpler in nature and we have just made them overly complicated. Right.
Yeah.
I think about that a lot. So I try to get back to making things as simple as possible. But yeah, I look back at this map and one other thing just to comment on, right? Like we do know it's not in Yellowstone National Park, right? So we can eliminate that out of the area. And I even question whether we can eliminate maybe a wider radius of that area because it seems like John may have never gone and really searched around there. Potentially, I don't know that for a fact, but again, just using context clues, and trying to figure out where he actually searched. He said he'd never looked in Yellowstone National Park, so that again makes me think maybe he didn't really even look outside of that general area.
Yeah,
but I don't know. Anyway, that was the last thing I was going to say.
Yeah, because the second paragraph here, but everything you need to know to arrive at a fairly close search area for our hobnail treasure box can be found within my poem below. To me, that's the capstone, right?
And one last question I want to ask you about it is why hobnail? Like I still don't know that I found like anyone who's made a super strong connection back to the Forrest Fenn box or like in the design.
To the original one, you mean?
Yeah. Well, yeah, go on.
Well, I just think that it was it was appropriate for the area. I mean, I could see from a design perspective why Seth chose use or went on his direction on it. It's fitting for it. I mean, this is John's hunt. This isn't Forrest Fenn's, right?
Yeah.
He wanted to make his own. And again, this is coming from the guy that thought the coins is discounted from the get-go. I may be wrong on this, but I'm using my, right to have my opinion on it. I just thought that was, appropriate for design. I think it fits well. What I think of the old Wild West, I think of hobnail things. I honestly never knew that that's what it was called because I haven't dug deep into that, but I can identify it. I can identify what that is because I've seen multiple things similar to that over the years. I just didn't know it was called hobnail, but I think it's appropriate because it's his hunt, and that's why I think that John is creating this tribute to Forrest Fenn's, but in his style, and maybe he didn't have a good closure like a lot of people on the Forrest Fenn, and decided to do a different way.
Yeah,
and then he could say once it is found, hey, look, it was right here, right? It wasn't that complicated like Forrest Fenn's was. I think I was talking to Wick about on our BTME one, and I don't know if it was on a video or not, but he said that, and I'm referencing, I don't know if exact word for word, but what Justin said, if Forrest Fenn's hunt was a level 10 being the most difficult, then Justin's is like a 5.
Really?
Huh. Yeah, and what's even more confusing is, although there is a general consensus that Forrest Fenn's was found in the location it was, again, it's not 100%. And I think both hunt creators, both John and Justin, want part of their experience of wanting to share this experience they had, is actually getting closure on this treasure hunt.
Yeah.
And I think about that all the time, because as I talk to more people that have done Fenns and watching Golden Greed, and it's, man, I can't even begin to imagine what it must be like, 10 years of, if somebody started soup to nuts from start to finish and never got closure at the end, I don't know how I'd handle that. I could, that would be like saying, even now, it's only been a year. And what if all of a sudden John puts on his website, as of now, all boxes have been found. See you later, and we don't hear from him again. It would be horrible. I would not be able to sleep at night.
Yeah.
So I think part of that experience, he's taking that consideration on this chapter, because this is the one I really want to see found first. I mean, I would love to be able to figure it out, but this is one that haunts me. This poem, I mean, I look at it and there's times I don't even know what to do with it.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to give up. I don't give up. And I want to figure it out. And that's why I have you on and people like you on, is to try to sneak in there before the end of a video. What are your thoughts on this? And sort of taking little bitty bites off of it. Because I do think this is plays a big role. Now, does the rest of the chapter? That's for another episode. And I've spent countless days, weeks, months on that chapter, only to be told, well, all you need is really the poem.
Yeah.
So
the one thing I'll just add, right, and not to dishearten you or myself even, or anyone listening, but the original Forrest Fenn hunt based off of a poem took 10 years.
10 years.
Right. And just knowing that, it's hard to be optimistic that this box will be found first, especially knowing that there's other boxes people are within 200 feet of, right? But to your point, right, I've gone back and I've looked at this box a lot, because I think that there's something we're just missing. There's something that's going to help identify, specific locations. And we do have a more defined area and metrics that we can look at, as we exhibited tonight.
Yeah.
To help you kind of just narrow things down. And I think theoretically, I mean, there's only so many trails and so many parks, within that 4-state search area. Now, they're massive, right? It's a lot of area, but I think you can try to think about, well, what of those might be important to John, which is what I've been asking myself lately, right? I don't have an answer for that, but he talks in the first line of the poem, a cruise around down a road I know, right? So it's something important to him, some place. So I think if you can nail that down, I think.
Or is it?
Or is it?
If you would join me on this crazy journey, I would love to have you on more, and we can discuss this, because I'm going to go crazy here pretty soon. Because if you think about it, add up all the hours, say first box doesn't get found for another 2 years, or say all these boxes don't get found until 10 years.
Yeah.
That is equivalent of going through not only your bachelor's degree, but your master's and possibly a doctorate degree of studying this stuff. The time that I know I spent more time on this than I probably did cumulatively for my bachelor's degree.
Yeah. Well, I'll see my kids grow up and go to college in that time period if that holds true.
And your kids would be like, yeah, crazy old man dad's still hunting for that treasure.
What does your dad do for fun? Oh, he likes to hunt the treasure.
Oh, man. Well, that's a great place to call it a night here. Mike, I really appreciate you coming on and humoring me and with my crazy ideas. And I appreciate you bringing the map on and explaining how to use that. I'll leave links in the description for both of us. And I want you back on sooner than later. And I want to talk more Forrest Fenn with you.
It's always a pleasure, Eric. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Mike.